everybody. Welcome to Your Right to Know with Tony DeFazio of DeFazio and Ziden. There has been a resurgence of O.J. Simpson interest based on the FX TV show that's now out. And there's been a lot of conversation about it, whether it should be out, what it's doing for the children these days, because now their privacy is getting invaded once again through all of this. But Tony's here to talk about it from his perspective. And first of all, I got to ask you, from what you've seen of the show, is it accurate?
Well, you know, it's given you a lot of inside stuff. It's based on a book by Jeffrey Toobin, who covered the trial. And it's interesting because you get kind of the backstory. But if what I remember, and because I was in law school when the case was going on, so not just as a media or an entertainment thing, you know, we were watching it because we were, you know, wanted to be lawyers, and so this is what lawyers do. And unfortunately, you kind of, when you watched it, and I was watching it every day, and you talk about it with your friends, and you talk about it with the law professors, they would always say to you, this is, everything they're doing there is wrong. Everything the judge is doing is wrong, everything is wrong, this is not the way. And one of the things was because of the media attention. Yeah. This was kind of the first real, I call it the trial of the century. It's probably the first trial since the Lindbergh kidnapping that was really covered this much. It was also the first time that TV was really in the courtroom since then, because it had been almost banned universally. But you had started to see states start to allow it in the courtroom, and this is the first time that this judge just let it in. And you saw everything that could go bad in a trial went bad in this thing because of the media. So, as a first level, the one thing that you get out of this trial is that the judge has a lot of control over his own courtroom, or her courtroom. And it's their judge's responsibility to maintain order, to keep these trials moving, and to get everybody a fair trial. And Judge Ito, to his credit, to his detriment, he did not do that. Mm-hmm. And you know, the circus that happened was mostly because of him. Mm-hmm. There have been high-profile media trials in New York, and even in the Hudson Valley, and there have been a lot of media coverage on many of these cases, and I have never seen that done here. You have judges that will take control. They will restrict media access, but mostly they just have to keep the lawyers in line. The prosecution, they have to keep that case moving, and the defense. The only other thing is that you got to really look at California versus New York. And the one thing you learn about California cases from this case and from other cases is that they just take forever to take these trials. I mean, that trial took 9 months. In New York, that trial would have taken 3 months, maybe 4 months. That's a long trial in New York. Out there, it took 9 months. It just kind of went on forever. There were witnesses on the stand. For example, the medical examiner got on the stand, and I've cross-examined and I've put on medical examiners before. A medical examiner was on the trial for 12 days. It was on the stand. And I have never seen a medical examiner on the stand for more than 3 hours. And that's cross and direct, because in a situation like this case, you know, they were clearly killed. They were clearly stabbed to death. They clearly died around the same time. And, you know, there was a certain range of the time of death. So I don't know why it takes 12 days to get essentially 2-3 hours of testimony out of somebody. So that was part of the problem, and that's part of the judge's problem and the prosecutor, but it's also because the prosecution and the defense were playing to the camera, and they're trying to put on this entertainment story and trying to keep their case going. So in one good part, I mean, people like me exist now really because of that trial, because a lot of people kind of made their bones on that trial, and then now all of a sudden they're well known. And the use of media analysts really came out of that case. Sure did. So it did. But I think there's a couple of really good points that did come out of the trial. The first is, it was the first real heavy use of DNA. Now you see DNA everywhere. They take DNA for any kind of weapon, any kind of crime scene, anything, they're taking DNA. And in fact, they now have a registry. If you're convicted of a crime in New York, you're on a registry with DNA. So they can use that. That was the first time they really used it. And even though there was some significant attacks on the way the stuff was handled and the control in the labs, the truth was DNA was really upheld in that case. Mm-hmm. I think the second part that really came out was the way domestic violence cases are treated in this country has significantly changed since O.J. Simpson. Before O.J. Simpson, and up until the 80s, there was almost like if you hit your wife, the cops would show up and just buy her flowers and take her out and call it a day. And that was really almost ingrained into because the person wouldn't want to prosecute anyway, and everybody just wrote these cases off. That changed. People saw that domestic violence had to be treated a lot more seriously. The prosecution started to do it. The cops started to do it. The judges started to take it seriously. You have domestic violence courts now set up, and that you could see because when they went through the case, they talked about all the prior incidents with O.J. Simpson, and those incidents you came out and you could see how it almost built to this crime. And then I think the third is police bias. And the incident with Mark Furman and the tapes that he had made and the use of the N-word and all these other things that he had said, that's the first time you really saw that argument of police bias used and successfully. Because I think in the end of the day, the reason that the verdict was a not guilty verdict had a lot to do with, I think, a lot of resentment that had been built up in that county and in that city between the people and the Los Angeles Police Department over the years. Yep. You had the riots, you had the other issues, and I think O.J. Simpson got the benefit of it. And that was the first time you really saw that. You haven't really seen that until maybe the last 2 years with the Black Lives Matters movement and those things, but you really haven't seen it since then. And I think the reason you haven't seen it is because there's been a lot of outreach done by police departments, professional departments, realizing that we have to make inroads with immigrant communities, with minority communities, and we have to be more receptive to what is going on. I think you've had a lot of success and you've had some not so success, as we've seen in recent years. But that's what the third thing, and probably the most important thing that came out of that trial was that. Unfortunately, I think the victims get lost in that. And O.J. Simpson got lost in that too. At the end of the day, everybody went their separate ways, and he got convicted of trying to rob some people in Las Vegas. He's still in jail for that. The families of the victims never really got, I think, what they wanted, and everybody else has gone to the four winds. So, but I think those three lessons really come out of it.
And the fact that there's a bit of a backstory in this, it gives you a little bit of an opportunity to see some of the things that have grown since then, like the whole Kardashian thing.
Well, yeah, they if you watch the show, I think every episode they're going to throw something in about the Kardashians because they're all kids. And, before their shows came out, it was Robert Kardashian, that was O.J. Simpson's friend, and he's on the trial, and he was involved in this case, and he's there. And you see some interaction with his kids, which is kind of funny as you watch it, knowing what is today, and then you see this interaction. Whether it's true or not, who knows? But it makes for good, poetic license, I assume.
Yeah, right. All right. Well, Tony, thank you so much. More insight from Tony DeFazio. You're watching Your Right to Know, and we'll see you next time.